You ever heard that saying, an Englishman's home is his castle?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, today's deep dive takes us back to a place and time where that idea was really put to the test.
Okay.
The battles of Lexington and Concord.
Right.
The opening shots of the American Revolution.
Yeah.
It's April 1775.
Mm-hmm.
Tensions between British-occupied Boston and the surrounding countryside have been simmering for months.
Mm-hmm.
Things are about to boil over.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go beyond that kind of simplified textbook version of these battles.
Okay.
We're going to use firsthand accounts
Right.
and some pretty intriguing trivia
Interesting.
to really bring the history to life for you.
Sounds good.
Get ready for some aha moments.
Yeah.
As we uncover the complex reality of what went down.
It wasn't just like a sudden explosion, though, was it?
Not at all.
There are years of buildup, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a powder keg situation.
So let's unpack that powder keg.
Sure.
What were some of the key factors leading up to this boiling point?
Well, you got to remember, for the colonists,
Right.
British troops in Boston weren't just a presence.
Right.
They were a direct threat to their liberty.
Mm-hmm.
These troops were there to enforce those intolerable acts.
The intolerable acts.
Yeah, passed by the British Parliament in response to the Boston Tea Party.
But it wasn't really about the tea itself, was it?
No, not really.
It was more symbolic.
Yeah,
There was a much deeper resentment brewing
exactly.
under the surface.
The Tea Party was a symbol of a much larger issue.
Right.
The colonists' growing anger about being taxed by a government they had no say in.
Taxation without representation.
Exactly.
That's where that comes from.
They felt their rights were being trampled on,
Yeah.
and this frustration fueled the creation of those colonial militias.
These weren't just casual groups, were they?
Oh, no, they were serious about defending their communities.
And these militias were surprisingly well-organized and well-trained, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Many of them had fought alongside the British
Mm-hmm.
in previous conflicts.
That's right, like the French and Indian War. They knew the land.
Right.
They were skilled marksmen.
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly, they were deeply motivated to protect their homes and families.
This is their backyard.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They were also gathering intelligence on the British.
Oh, really?
The colonists had a network of spies keeping them informed of British movements,
Wow.
which played a crucial role in events like the powder alarms.
So we have this powder keg situation.
Yeah.
We have these powder alarms.
Yeah.
Tell me more about those.
Okay.
What exactly happened?
These were a series of incidents where the British tried to seize colonial gunpowder and weapons.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? They were largely unsuccessful.
Why?
Thanks to the colonists' vigilance
Okay.
and their ability to mobilize quickly.
Wow. So they were ready.
They were ready.
Now there are even theories suggesting that Margaret Gage,
Who's that?
the wife of the British general, was secretly feeding information to the colonists.
Wow.
Imagine that.
Espionage within the British command.
What kind of information was she supposedly passing along?
Well, while there's no definitive proof,
Okay.
some historians believe that she might have tipped off Patriot leaders about British plans to seize colonial military supplies.
So they could move them?
Yeah, and this could have played a role in their ability to move those supplies to safety
Right.
before the British arrived,
Interesting.
particularly in Concord.
Yeah.
Remember, at this time, information traveled slowly.
Right.
So having someone on the inside, so to speak, could have been invaluable.
So we've got this powder keg.
Yeah.
We have simmering tensions, a vigilant and prepared colonial militia,
Uh-huh.
and then there's this famous midnight ride.
Right.
Everyone knows the story of Paul Revere.
Oh, yeah.
But was it really just one lone rider galloping through the night?
Not at all.
Okay.
The colonists had developed a far more sophisticated system of alarm and Really?
It wasn't just one rider.
Okay.
It was a network
Oh,
of
man.
communication.
Yeah.
Bells, drums, bonfires, and multiple riders spreading the word.
Like a colonial-era text message chain.
Yeah, you could say that.
So Paul Revere wasn't the only one out there?
Nope.
Who else was involved?
Well, Paul Revere's ride is definitely legendary,
Right.
but we can't forget about other riders like William Dawes.
Okay.
And we absolutely have to mention Samuel Prescott.
Samuel Prescott.
Yeah.
I'm not as familiar with him.
Prescott was actually the one who completed the ride to Concord
Oh, wow.
after Revere was captured by a British patrol.
He made sure that the warning got through.
Yeah, and allowed the colonists to prepare.
Wow.
Without Prescott,
Yeah.
the outcome at Concord might have been very different.
So we have our powder keg.
Yeah.
We have our intricate warning system
Mm-hmm.
and these dedicated colonial militias ready to defend their land. This brings us to those first shots of the American Revolution, Lexington Green. And, while the skirmish at Lexington Green was a relatively minor military engagement, it was a pivotal moment psychologically.
More symbolic than strategic.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Lexington Green became a powerful symbol of colonial resistance, really helped to galvanize support for the patriot cause.
Yeah.
It was the spark that ignited the revolution, even if the fighting itself wasn't particularly decisive.
So paint the picture for us.
Okay.
It's sunrise, April 19th, 1775. About 700 British regulars under Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith march into Lexington, where they face off against Captain John Parker and his company of about 80 militiamen assembled on the village green.
It's almost like a scene from a movie.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
What happened next?
Well, accounts from both sides conflict.
Okay.
We might never know for sure who fired first.
Yeah.
Some witnesses claimed it was a British officer firing a warning shot, while others say a colonial militiaman fired from behind cover.
Gotcha.
What we do know is that things escalated quickly.
Right.
Volleys of musket fire were exchanged. 8 colonists were killed, and 10 were wounded.
Okay.
The British, however, only had 1 casualty.
Really?
Sadly outnumbered, the militia was forced to fall back, and the British regulars continued their march toward Concord.
To seize those military supplies.
Yeah, that's right.
So Lexington was a British victory. But at what cost?
Right.
Seems like this was just the beginning of a very long and difficult day for them.
Absolutely.
What happened as they pressed on to Concord?
That's where we'll delve in next time.
Okay.
You won't want to miss it.
I'll be here.
I know you will.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the battles of Lexington and Concord.
Thanks for having me back.
When we left off, the British were marching towards Concord after their encounter at Lexington Green. They thought they were on a simple mission to seize those colonial military supplies.
Yeah, but they didn't know that the colonists, thanks to those riders we talked about earlier, had already moved most of those supplies to safety.
So the British show up in Concord expecting a stockpile of weapons and ammunition.
Right.
And find
not much at all.
What a bust.
Yeah. The British were determined to find something.
Yeah.
So they split into companies to search.
Yeah.
Some headed to the North Bridge, while others scoured local farms,
including
Colonel James Barrett's farm, which had been an arsenal just weeks before.
They were in the right spot.
Yeah, but they were just a little late.
Meanwhile, militia companies from all the surrounding towns are converging on Concord.
They sensed a fight was coming.
They knew something was up.
Yeah, and their numbers were growing larger by the hour.
I bet.
They were in a really strong position, too.
Yeah.
They knew the land like the back of their hands.
This is their backyard.
Exactly. And they were deeply motivated to defend their homes and families.
Yeah.
This local knowledge and their fierce determination would prove crucial in the hours to come.
Yeah.
Especially at the North Bridge.
All right. So set the scene for us.
Okay.
It's mid-morning. The tension is building.
Oh, yeah.
You've got British regulars in their bright red uniforms.
Yeah.
Lined up in formation on one side of the bridge. And on the other side, you have
the colonial militia.
Yeah.
A diverse group of farmers and shopkeepers.
Everyday citizens.
Yeah.
Armed with whatever they could find.
Right.
It was a clash of worlds.
It really was.
It's a clash of military styles.
You could say that the British were trained in traditional European warfare.
Right.
They were accustomed to fighting in open fields in those neat lines.
Right.
But the colonists, well, they were more accustomed to what we might call irregular warfare.
Okay.
They were ready to use the terrain to their advantage.
And that difference in tactics would have a major impact on how the battle played out.
Absolutely.
So what happens next?
Well, seeing smoke rising from the town, where the British were burning some supplies they found, the colonial commander, Colonel Barrett, decided to move his men closer to the bridge.
Okay.
He ordered Captain Isaac Davis.
Isaac Davis?
Yeah, and his company of Acton Minutemen to lead the advance.
And I think this is where Davis utters those famous words.
Oh, yeah, what were they again?
I'm not afraid to go, and I haven't a man that's afraid to go.
What a line.
I know.
And what's remarkable is that Davis and his men were ordered not to fire unless fired upon.
Wow.
They marched toward the bridge, muskets loaded, but with restraint.
That takes a lot of courage.
I know, right?
To face down a line of British regulars like that.
For sure.
So what did the British do?
Well, the British commander at the bridge, Captain Walter Lorry.
Walter Lorry.
Yeah, was likely outnumbered.
Probably.
And pretty nervous. He ordered his men to retreat across the bridge.
Okay.
But things didn't go as smoothly as he'd hoped.
There's always that moment in battles where the plans fall apart.
Yeah.
And chaos takes over.
Right, and that's exactly what happened.
What happened?
Confusion set in, and a shot rang out.
Who fired it?
It was probably a warning shot from a panicked British soldier.
Okay.
Then several more shots were fired.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and the fighting escalated quickly.
And this is where the colonial militia's guerrilla tactics really shone.
You got it.
They took cover behind trees, stone walls, anything they could find.
Yeah.
And they fired on the exposed British troops who were bunched up on the bridge.
Right. They were easy targets.
It's classic guerrilla warfare.
Exactly.
Using the terrain to your advantage, striking quickly and disappearing back into the landscape.
The British weren't ready for this.
I bet.
They were used to fighting in open formations.
Right.
And this unconventional style completely flustered them.
Yeah.
They suffered heavy casualties, with several officers and sergeants among the wounded and killed.
So it's a victory for the underdog.
Absolutely.
The outnumbered and outgunned colonists routing the supposedly superior British force.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
What happened next?
Well, they regrouped.
Okay.
But their morale was shaken.
Yeah.
They were demoralized and low on ammunition. They were forced to retreat back into the town, layer their dead and wounded behind.
Wow. This victory at the North Bridge really emboldened the colonists.
Absolutely.
And enraged the British.
For sure.
It seems like the fighting wasn't over yet, though.
It wasn't.
The British still had to march all the way back to Boston.
Yeah.
And that's where things took a dark turn.
Unfortunately, yes.
Tell me about it.
The retreat from Concord was no longer a neat, orderly march. It became a running battle.
Oh, wow.
The British were under constant fire from colonial militia companies. Who seemed to be everywhere.
They were relentless.
Attacking from all sides.
It must felt like they were trapped in a nightmare.
You can say that again.
Were they picking them off one by one?
Pretty much they were harassed every step of the way. They were exhausted, low on ammunition.
Right.
And facing an enemy that seemed to know every inch of the land.
It was their backyard.
Exactly. And remember, these colonial militiamen weren't professional soldiers.
Right.
They were farmers, shopkeepers, blacksmiths.
Yeah.
Ordinary people who were driven to fight for their homes and their liberty.
Yeah.
And their determination, coupled with their knowledge of the terrain, proved incredibly effective.
Wow.
They knew every hill, every tree, every stone wall, and they used that knowledge to ambush the British at every turn.
The British were used to fighting on open battlefields.
Right.
They were completely out of their element in this kind of environment.
Totally.
It sounds chaotic and terrifying.
The retreat was marked by several key moments where the fighting was particularly intense, places that became etched in history. One such place was Miriam's Corner.
Miriam's Corner.
Yeah, the narrow bridge there forced the British to bunch up key targets for the militia.
Wow.
And then there was a place known as the Bloody Angle.
The Bloody Angle.
Yeah, where the road curved sharply. And the British found themselves caught in a deadly crossfire.
Oh, no.
Attacked from both sides.
They must have been desperate to escape.
By this point, the British commander, Lieutenant Colonel Smith, had been wounded.
Okay.
And their hope of a quick and easy mission, well, that had completely vanished.
They thought they could just waltz in.
They did.
And waltz out.
Yeah, they thought.
Run wrong. Now they're outnumbered, outmaneuvered. Demoralized.
The situation was dire.
Yeah.
They desperately needed help.
So what happened?
Did they manage to escape?
Yeah.
That, my friend, is a story for next time, when we'll explore the dramatic conclusion of the battles of Lexington and Concord.
Can't wait. Welcome back to our deep dive into the battles of Lexington and Concord.
Always a pleasure.
Last time we left off, the British were in a pretty tough spot, weren't they?
They were in dire straits.
Exhausted. Low on ammo, under constant attack as they tried to make their way back to Boston.
Right.
It seemed like the colonial militia might just overwhelm them.
Yeah, it was a close call, for sure.
So what happened? Did they manage to escape this nightmare?
They did, but it was a close one.
Tell me about it.
Reinforcements arrived just in the nick of time.
Ah, so they were rescued.
Yeah, you could say that.
Who came to their rescue?
A brigade of about 1,000 men under the command of Earl Percy.
Oh, Percy.
Yeah. He arrived in Lexington and gave those beleaguered British troops a much-needed break.
I bet they were relieved.
Oh, yeah, you can imagine.
So Percy arrives on the scene, and he sees what's happening. He realizes this isn't the same situation that Smith had faced earlier in the day.
Not at all. He quickly realized he couldn't just march his troops in a column and expect them to survive.
Oh, no.
So he had them form a moving box formation.
Moving box formation.
Yeah, with flanking companies to protect their sides and rear and artillery ready to go.
So he essentially created this mobile fortress.
Exactly. He recognized that the colonial militia's strength was in their agility.
Okay.
And their knowledge of the terrain.
Right.
And so Percy's strategy was to prevent them from using those advantages.
To ambush his troops.
Exactly. Yeah. Smart thinking, right.
Yeah. But even with this new formation, I imagine the retreat was still pretty harrowing.
Oh, it was. And unfortunately, the casualties continued to mount.
On both sides.
On both sides of the colonists.
Yeah.
Now under the overall command of Brigadier General William Heath, they also adapted their tactics.
Oh, so...
They knew they couldn't defeat the British in a traditional open battle.
Right.
So they stuck with those guerrilla-style attacks. Yeah.
Harassing Percy's troops from behind trees, stone walls.
Even houses.
Even houses?
This is where that saying comes in.
What saying?
An Englishman's home is his castle.
Oh, yeah.
Some colonists turned their homes into battlegrounds.
That's right. Instead of fleeing, some colonists stood their ground and fought the British from within their own homes.
There's that tragic example at the Jason Russell House in Menotomy.
That's right.
Which is present-day Arlington. Russell famously said, an Englishman's home is his castle.
I have heard that.
As he urged his friends to join him in defending his house.
Such a powerful image.
Sadly, he was killed in his own doorway.
It's a reminder of the terrible cost of war.
So this wasn't just a strategic retreat. This was a desperate struggle for survival.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, for the British, it was a race against time.
Yeah, their ammunition was running low.
They were exhausted.
They were thirsty.
Hungry, probably.
Probably, yeah, and constantly under fire. It's remarkable they made it out at all.
It is. It sounds like utter chaos.
So how did they finally escape?
Well, Percy's brigade, under the cover of darkness, finally reached Charlestown, where they were protected by the guns of the British warships.
So they made it out by the skin of their teeth.
They did.
So looking back, what's the legacy of the battles of Lexington and Concord?
That's a good question.
Were they a decisive military victory for either side?
Well, tactically, these battles were perhaps not as significant as some others in the war.
Okay.
The British didn't achieve their goal of seizing colonial military supplies and their casualties, while substantial didn't cripple their forces.
Right.
But the symbolic impact of these battles was enormous.
These were the opening shots.
Exactly.
Of the American Revolution.
The conflict that would lead to the birth of a new nation.
It's that idea of the shot heard round the world.
That's it.
As Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote in his poem, Concord Hymn, these battles resonated far beyond the immediate conflict.
Absolutely. The fighting at Lexington and Concord showed the world that the colonists were willing to fight and die for their liberty.
It was a powerful message.
It galvanized support for the patriot cause.
Both in the colonies and in Europe.
Everywhere.
It also exposed the challenges the British would face in trying to suppress a determined and resourceful enemy.
Right, an enemy fighting on its own soil.
It's interesting to think about those differences in military tactics we've been talking about.
Yeah.
The British, accustomed to that traditional European warfare, they were ill-prepared for the colonists' guerrilla tactics, their marksmanship, and their knowledge of the terrain.
Lexington and Concord were a wake-up call for the British.
Yeah.
They showed them that this war would be unlike anything they had anticipated.
So we've seen how a clash of military tactics, a few fateful decisions, transformed what was supposed to be a quick mission into the beginning of a revolution.
It makes you think.
About what?
What if those shots hadn't been fired?
Yeah.
Would America's path to independence have unfolded differently?
That's a question for the history books.
It is.
But what we can say for sure is that the legacy of Lexington and Concord continues to inspire.
It does.
It reminds us of the courage,
the determination,
the sacrifice that was required to create a new nation.
It's a story that resonates centuries later.
For sure.
A testament to the power of ordinary people fighting for what they believe in.
Well said. And on that note, we wrap up our deep dive into the battles of Lexington and Concord.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring.